Welcome to this edition of the Nerdthusiast Gaming Podcast, where we will be discussing Game Collecting 101. We're going to give you guys some basics on how to start collecting. We're additionally going to be talking about spiritual successors, the good, the okay, and the ugly. And we're going to be doing a pulse check. It's going to be a snapshot of video game pricing. So you guys will hear all of that in this episode. But first, of course, joining with me as always, my good friend Wes. Wes, how you doing, sir?
What's going on, my friend? I'm good. How are you?
I'm also doing very well, very well. Happy to be here today. Before we get started, guys, just a couple of quick pieces of housekeeping. If you could, please go and support us over on Patreon, patreon.com/nerdthusiast. You can support us for as little as $1 a month. That'll get you exclusive content. The $5 tier gets you early ad-free access to a variety of our shows. In addition to that, you can support us on the free feeds. If you guys can go to like Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, give us some like 5-star ratings over there. That really does help us out in the algorithm, and we truly appreciate it. All right, guys, so we came up with 6 questions to ask you about video game collecting. So in order for us to tell you what and where and how you should collect, you have to ask yourself some questions. So we're going to be asking those questions for you so you can ask these to yourself. Sounds pretty confusing, but it's really not that hard. Wes.
Yes, sir.
Let's start out with the first question. Go for it.
So, game collecting 101. I guess the first question you need to ask yourself is, why do you want to collect video games? Like, what is your drive to collect video games? Is it for the passion? Is it for the investment purposes? Is it nostalgia's sake? Like, what is your reason?
Absolutely. You need to know why, right? To Wes's point, if you're doing it for money, you're going to want to target a whole different, aspect of games. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you want to go for like more rare and sought after items.
What's your reason?
Okay. So why do I collect video games? Or why do I want to collect video games? I don't know. I've always loved games. It's just about being able to play them like whenever I want, stuff from like years ago, right? I'm freaking almost 40 now, and stuff from like stuff from like 360 is kind of nostalgic at this point, which was probably 15 years ago, roughly, somewhere around there.
2005.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm kind of nostalgic for 360 and PS3 stuff. I'm way more excited to find those games than I am to find PS4 or Xbox One games. It was just a generation ago. But yeah, I mean, it's about having that stuff and being able to play it in the future, which is why I am not totally, but mostly against digital games, because I want to be able to go back to these later on. And I don't have the rights to digital games. I have a license to use it, and who knows when that license will be revoked. So
right. Okay.
What about you?
Like you, I've always loved video games. I guess for me at this point in time, it's really a lot of nostalgia. Yeah, because I can remember like what I was doing in these games, playing these games back in the day. Unfortunately, tragedy happened and I lost a good chunk of my early collection. So it's trying to replace what was lost.
Stuff you had before, right?
Exactly.
Just for the audience, so they know, like, what generations did you lose, like, and you're trying to rebuild?
Nintendo, Genesis, and Super Nintendo.
Okay.
So,
you know what?
Like
it's better to
big
be
money ones.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Now it's not as bad as it was like before COVID. Like it's not a terrible time to collect those games. Like the prices have gone down. Like if you were collecting those games 2 years ago, it was way worse. But I mean, it was like that for most games in general. But it does seem like, especially like NES games. I went to a convention, the SoCal Gaming Expo, a few months ago, and like people were not moving NES games, man. They were sitting there the entire convention. Like, I mean, sure, you have some people looking for them, but I do feel that all 3 of those systems are on the decline. Super Nintendo is probably holding the strongest out of those 3, though.
Yeah, because you know what? No matter where I go, if I go to any kind of retro store, Super Nintendo stuff is pretty hard to come by, especially complete.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going for complete, that's a whole nother story. If you're just talking about loose carts, then yeah, I mean, you're not going to have that big of a deal.
Exactly. So no, that's my reasoning. I just love video games. I love video games. Anywhere from Atari to Genesis to Dreamcast to 360. You know, even to this day, we're still playing, man. So, I, video gaming is in my blood.
Well, that's a perfect segue to go on to the next part. So this is the next question that you guys need to be asking yourselves, and it's what is it you like about video games? So that's the question you should be asking second. Like, what do you like about them? And let's just answer that ourselves. What do you like about video games, Wes? Other than nostalgia, which we've
Other than nostalgia, fun factor. Fun factor, as well as, like, I was an arcade kid, as everybody knows. So I like the arcade experience at home, so to speak. I missed that with the early 16, 32-bit generations. That's what it was all about. So I like story. I like a good story if it has it. I like the action. It's a little bit of everything. I love the art. I used to, no one knows, but I used to draw and paint years ago. So I was always attracted to graphics and art. So if a game has, nice graphics, or if it's hand drawn, like sprites, it attracts me like immediately. So
what made you stop doing art?
time.
Fair enough.
Time and children.
Not going to argue with you about that at all.
What about you?
I mean, fun. I mean, that's the best way you could describe it, right? You said fun factor, and like when you say that, I also immediately think of GamePro back in the day. If it had a fun factor of like a 5.0, was the guy like freaking
Yes,
out?
It did.
Like, oh my
yes,
god,
it did.
That is such. If you were from that era, like that is an iconic piece of imagery. Seeing that guy like freaking out, like the 5.0. But yeah, that was the fun factor was one of the things that GamePro graded on. It wasn't just the only thing, but yeah, how fun is this stuff to do, right? Like that's why we probably originally played games because it was fun, it was entertaining, and you could be entertained many ways. You can watch a movie, you can watch TV, you could listen to music, you could play a video game. I just happen to think that because you're interacting with the media as opposed to being, just sitting there and having it consume you, you are consuming it essentially, right? You're engaging with it, and in an RPG, you are playing a role of a character. In a story-driven game like The Last of Us, you are experiencing this epically written story that's just as good as any other TV show or movie. Well, obviously now TV show,
yeah.
But so I think it's just in my opinion, it's probably the best way you're going to experience any kind of media that exists today.
No, I agree. Like first-person shooters were designed because you were that character. You were supposed to be that character, so it tried to put you in the game. So no, I 100% correct.
Yeah, it's like playing Doom for the first time. Like, oh my god. Yeah. So, what is it that you guys like about video games? Answer that yourselves. Go ahead and drop a comment. Let us know over on the YouTube side of things. So that's question 2. Question 3. What systems do you find appealing? So you should probably be picking a system to focus on. That's really going to help you narrow your scope as opposed to going in blind. Like a lot of this is, if you look at this thing that we've created, essentially we're just helping you narrow down your focus to figure out what it is you like and what it is you should be focusing on to collect. So this is a big part of that is what system or systems do you find appealing? Wes, what are you collecting for right now?
Right now, I'm on the hunt for, like I said earlier, Genesis, Super Nintendo, and some Sega CD. But you brought up a really good point because I see it a lot of the newer customers that come in to level up. Even on the comic book side, they're like, well, what do I collect? I want to start collecting comic books, or I want to start collecting video games. And I kind of tell them, pick something you like, because you could just pick random stuff and kind of lose your enthusiasm real quick because you need to be focused. So,
right.
Pick a system. If it's, whatever your reason is, if it's Genesis, because you remember growing up playing Genesis, then focus on Genesis.
Yeah.
Don't go Genesis, Dreamcast, just kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different systems because, this it's really not, it's pointless.
You'll naturally branch out into those things as time goes
Exactly.
on, but you need to, if you're going to stick around in the hobby of doing this, you're going to need to understand what it is you like, and go down that path. I'll give you a perfect example. If I was in that position and somebody started recommending me a bunch of turn-based RPGs, I'm gonna stop after probably like a day or two. I'm gonna be like, your guys are crazy. This is what you guys enjoy. Like, this is not appealing to me at all. You want me to sit there and wait for a prompt, and then my guy attacks, and I sit there and wait to get hit? Get the hell out of here. It's not. That's not what I'm here to do. I know other people love that genre, but just an example. For me, I'm focused on a couple of different systems right now. Obviously, I've been doing this for a long time, so I kind of know where I want to be. If you guys have been following this recently, I've mentioned I got an Analog Pocket, so I am still on the lookout for Game Boy Advance games specifically. Not really so much Game Boy or Game Boy Color, but really Game Boy Advance. But I want them to be complete in box because nearly my entire collection is complete in box for that system. So I need to mentally, I'm broken and I need to maintain what I already have. It has to continue to be complete in box. Genesis, same thing. I'm looking for Genesis games that I rented back in the day or have some sort of familiarity with, or something I just find interesting. I don't have a ton of Genesis games, which is why I'm focusing in on that. Same situation as the Game Boy Advance. It has to be complete in box because, again, nearly my entire Genesis collection is complete in box. And then the last one will be Dreamcast. And Dreamcast is just because I started getting back into that system not too long ago. Through the help of Wes, I found some difficult to find titles over the past couple of years. So I'm going to continue doing that with Dreamcast for a while, and those again have to be complete in box. I mean, the stuff that I would say I collect loose, just so you guys know, I collect loose NES cards and loose Super Nintendo cards. Almost every other system I try to get stuff complete in box for, but NES and Super Nintendo, I'm actually looking for the loose copies. I don't even care if they're complete in box. If they are, great as a bonus, but I'm not going out of my way to find them.
You bring up a really good point. Are you trying to go for loose? Does it matter, or do you want to go complete in box? Because it's technically it's two different markets.
Far different prices for most systems too.
Exactly. That's another thing. Yeah. So if you're trying to go complete in box because it looks really nice on your shelf, oh, I get it. Trust me, I get it. I'm that way. I'm that person. But if that doesn't matter to you and you just want to own the game, by all means, if you can find the loose cart, save yourself a bunch of money and just pick up the cart.
Right. You can still play the game. You just don't have the manual or the box, and you can always find them online. You can get repros of boxes and stuff if you wanted to, if you really wanted to. There's a really cool company now. I don't know if you're aware of them, Wes. They're called Mini Box Gaming.
Mm-hmm.
They make replica boxes, like mini boxes, though. So, if you bought a cart, like a Super Nintendo, it would just be a little bit bigger than the cart, so the cart fits perfectly in there. But the box replicates the original artwork and everything. It's really cool.
You know what? Our friend Rob, I want to say he used that company because he bought lot of. Yeah, he bought a lot of loose carts. Rob, if you're listening, yes, I'm talking about you. And he showed me he had, he printed up box art, bought boxes and everything. It looked good.
Yeah, that company makes high quality images and stuff, and they're charging you for them. They're making money from it. But I thought it was really cool. Instead of making the full size boxes, they're just a little bit bigger than the cart.
Cool.
So if you're collecting loose carts, that's something to look out for.